What Gonoradu Sawagwegu Gotitsagatsayujats. My English name is Lindsay Delaronde. I am the Indigenous Resurgence Coordinator for the Fine Arts Department. I have created a series of interviewing Indigenous artists, educators, and knowledge keepers. The series that I created is called the Blue Heron series. And for me, really reflecting with artists during this time has been really important to stay connected. And so we have our third interview with Tekatsi'tsaneken Everstz. And when I was thinking about people who I wanted to speak to, you were someone that I thought of. And I just want to let people know a little bit of our own history. Is we are both from Kahnawake, and so I've known Dega for my whole life basically, and I just really value your knowledge, and I value the way that you work with community and you bring those Kanien'keha'ka teachings forward. And so I just wanted to say nyao for your time today. You're here to speak to faculty and students at the University of Victoria about Indigenous art and your practice, and just allow it to be a really fluid conversation. So maybe you can introduce yourself and tell us who you are.
Well, second sa wagwego, negi Tekatsi'tsaneken Everstz, tano waskarewage, ne wagitarota, nega Kahnawake, Nitawagenyo, Kanienkehaka ni jadota. So again, it's a pleasure being here. My name is Tekatsi'tsaneken Everstz. I hail from the Mohawk Nation of Kahnawake. I'm Bear Clan. And where I am at now, where I'm coming into live, is I want to acknowledge that I am on the and acknowledge with gratitude really the traditional stewards of this unceded land, this unceded ancestral land of the Coast Salish people, including the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Stolo nations, and the nation's family and their communities and their descendants, and also to respect and pay acknowledgements to the ancestors, the supernatural ones, the hereditary leaders and matriarchs and creatures, big and small, for looking after looking after the rich resources and cultural teachings of this land. And it's an absolute honor to be welcomed here. And to continue doing the work here and to represent myself as Kanienkeha'ka, Kanien'keha'ka people, and really to be here with you today on this. And so, yeah, it's absolute pleasure.
So some of the things that we kind of pre-talked about, is around decolonizing in the arts, and not to get right into that, but maybe you can tell us a little bit of your history as an artist. I know you've also attended institution post-secondary at IAIA, and experienced more of the framework that I think more traditional institutions offer artists. And so maybe a little bit of your journey as an artist.
Yeah, and it's funny because I was just speaking to this, and growing up in a community that is so culturally rich and artistically, creatively rich and diverse. Art is in everything we do. Creativity is in everything we do, every expression that we have. And so I, at a young age, was very fortunate to discover my own creative side, my own creative abilities, if you will. And that really did kind of push forward my opportunities for challenging myself at an early age, with traditional outfit beadwork. I'm very, very proud and very humble to have been uh, uh, met with a family and a mother whose beadwork and reputation around beadwork and art, and my sister who also attended Institute of American Indian Art in New Mexico. Um, just a lot of artists around me. And so the growing up and going to school, and we attended the same school, and uh, having always been challenged, right? Always being challenged to do better in our art, to do even within the classroom from a peer-to-peer level. I remember the two, and this was from grade 1 upward, till graduation, was there was always this peer-to-peer challenge, and all the art was so focused on expression of who we were, expression and the pride of Haudenosaunee people, right? And just that full representation. So going into having class art competitions and knowing the peer-to-peer competitiveness of expression. What does it look like? How can we push ourselves? I remember Decolonized, absolutely amazing artist, and your sister actually, Jillian, who was in the other class, and always having to know that if there was some kind of art competition, if there was some kind of art creative opportunity, it was okay, well, we have competition, and who is going to push themselves, not who's going to be the best. Obviously you think about that as a kid, right? But it was really trying to understand how your sister was going to express our pride and joy of whatever the contest was, and knowing she was a formidable artist and still is. So growing up, there was always that piece of expression, and I grew up with, again, in a lot of it did focus on textile and beadwork and painting, and my home was filled with, we had our own library of mediums and paints and beadwork or beads, and all kinds of crafts and supplies, and it was like endless. So your creativity was endless, and so that carried on to the work. Going, decided to go to, initially I wanted to go into culinary arts, and then I kind of, watching my older sister, who's about 20 years older than me. At the time, I was very small, and she came back from Institute of American Indian Art. And I could always remember her talking about how great it was there and the beauty of the land. And just being on a different land changes your art. And the way she would express it is the land speaks to you, right? The spirits of that land. And I always refer to things as earth knowledge, right? The cultural teachings that you have here are unique to here, and the ancestors and the people who steward and live on this space, it moves through them. So as you move to different spaces, that expression becomes different. And so I wanted to experience that. I wanted to follow in my sister's shoes. So going out there, and being in a space that was Western in many respects, like the Western pedagogy,
Mhm.
but it challenged you and it decolonized certain approaches where it focused on expression of you as an Indigenous person to
Mm.
speak to the Western, pedagogy, um, as a way to kind of marry the two.
Right.
And so,
Have you experienced the marrying of the two? Like contemporary, like coming from like a powwow dancer, and
mm,
really being in the arena, I think I mean, how many moments can you reflect back and think, about all those times you stood in that arena, in
mhm,
the powwow circle, dancing and, showcasing that expression that you're talking about. Um,
mm,
and then like you said, in, the Western, when clash or the marrying of the two, or however we decide to work with both those energies, have you been able,
mhm.
even in your work, bring those traditional teachings into the contemporary? Is that important for you?
Totally. I think, growing up with a very, powwow rich family, powwow background, having both my mother and father part of the American Indian movement, um, being being kicked out of kindergarten for refusing to do the Pledge of Allegiance, right?
Mm.
Because I was like, that's not my flag. I'm not going to accept that. I'm not going to pledge, what, kindergarten, right? I was like, I recognize who I was at an early stage. And being a dancer, in, just anywhere really, longhouse, powwow arena, or presentation, or going international. I was very fortunate to go international many times to perform. um
The ambassador,
Thinking back,
the
yeah,
ambassador, how does
ambassadors.
how's that created? The ambassadors, because you guys traveled a lot and you did advocacy work for Haudenosaunee people in all kinds of contexts,
Hmm.
probably many
Hmm.
theaters, many spaces and places where you would do cultural presentations. Would you call them cultural presentations when we're taking our songs and our dances, and we're expressing them in different cultural events or events that we get the invitation to? What was that for the ambassadors?
Well, I think to scale up to that, thinking about the dance area, and I've always been very connected to dance and powwow, and I think to answer that previous question is, there is a time and place, when you're in when you're dancing, great feather dance, a stoa goa, when you're dancing in powwow, like the first step you make onto that land, or the first, there's like a few seconds drawing up to when you actually dance into the song, right? There's this weird connection, and you almost see it in people where they exit themselves, right? And I've seen you do it as a dancer. There's, the beat starts, and you're, for about 15, not even 10 seconds, you're
Yeah,
not actually dancing.
right.
And then when you actually dance, it turns on. There's that piece where I always see it as you are exiting your body.
Mm.
And it's almost like you become a little bit higher than yourself. You zone out, and it is a ritual. It is the practice of, meditation. You see all these stories about people who can't walk, or are elders, and they're like, just the minute they get onto a dance floor, or
Mm.
the drum hits them, and that beat, it's their spirit taking over that space. And so, in competition, especially, in powwow, it's in competition, I don't remember half the things I do there. You zone out, and
Interesting.
it's a mental space, it's a ritual. And uh, that, I think, is one of the, for me, is the biggest way for me to ground myself and keep myself healthy and keep my spirit fed. And before I start, every time I always either touch the floor or grab some dirt from the ground and I put it right here. Why? I don't know. I've always done it, and it's just to keep my body there, and because I know I move out of that. And so whether I am in a performance mode or going internationally, there's with the Eastern Sky Ambassadors, our cultural, we didn't want to say we are cultural performers. We didn't want to say we were a dance troupe.
Right.
We prided ourselves as knowledge holders, and and we held that with a lot of humility in there, to say we are ambassadors. Wherever we go, especially as Haudenosaunee people, wherever we go, our reputation can precede us. So we go there again as ambassadors to that space, and always keeping with Kanienkeha'ka in a good mind, and representing us to the fullest. So with the Eastern Sky Ambassadors and having many different dance troupes I've been with, but specifically Eastern Sky Ambassadors, going across the world and representing yourself, representing and sharing very limited knowledge, right? Like especially in a social dance.
Right.
It was a beauty. It's an honor to be able to share a social dance where we would call in our cousins, we would call in our friends, we would call in people who we wanted to not show and perform for. We wanted to be part of their world and have them come into ours for just a second. So I think that was it's in many respects it's a ceremony. It is a ceremony, and it's a social ceremony where you're connecting to those people, you're connecting to their heart, you're connecting to their spirit, through dance, right?
It's beautiful. This understanding of what intercultural knowledge sharing is, I think it's profound, that our language and songs and ways of expression, you brought that globally, so that nationhood building really moving outside of North America into, international, indigenous, and really pulling, I think, a beautiful story through about Haudenosaunee people. And I think about that group because I think it has a lot of potential to really show how diversity can manifest in a good way. You still have those cultural boundaries. And I guess what I'm trying to think about is how we share knowledge, and those governance structures of how we share knowledge, and how do we keep those parallels that the two-row wampum talks about. It's like, how do we hold multiple truths in the development of research and in education as a teacher, facilitator? I mean, I think the other reason why I really wanted for people to hear what you think about community-based work, and maintaining that connection. I think for students, sometimes, through their research, there could be that disconnect, even though they're building their knowledge, they're walking their path of education. A lot of those community initiatives are highlighted within the academy. Working with community is something that I think is a goal to doing research. You want to see how that knowledge is actually working with community. And so I thought, because of your position working at the Dudes Club, you have and come from a very grounded practice in community-based work. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of those values and some of the ways that you do work with the population you do, and what's effective, and what does intimacy mean, and how is that actually created when organizations create policies, procedures, and mandates, and then they implement that for communities. And do you see that being successful, and how?
That's a huge question. Okay, let's attack it. Yes. When I think about community, I acknowledge before anything, you know, my gift to connect with community and connect with people is really just that. It's a gift, right? My facilitation skills, you know, when being acknowledged for that type of work, you know, and hearing it saying, you know, you're being identified as a gifted facilitator, to be able to connect with the heart, to connect with community. It is not mine. It is our ancestors. It is our community. It's our descendants who, you know, that is a bloodline trait, the way I see it.
Mm.
And because we are so focused on the core of community and
Mm.
understanding who is at that core, you know, for us, at the core of our community is our matriarchs. It is our clan mothers. It is, and at least from my perspective, right? And at the core, you know, I'd love to know where our clan mothers see the core, right? It's almost like it constantly folds into each other, constantly folds into, it's the people, and the expression of that, uh, you know, that connection to community
Yeah, yeah.
is, and maybe that's, you know, I can only speak from my perspective and my nationhood, is we value community and the strength of the people, right? Ensuring that we are focused in on peace, understanding, coming in from a place of peace even when they are not, is
Mm.
that we're here to be peaceful.
Mm.
You know, and within that has so much power
Mm.
around knowing we don't need to exercise that type of, you know, power is both a negative and positive.
Right, right.
And so understanding where the power is within that community, where is it held, who holds it, how are they distributing it, right?
And the
And
leadership, do you think, is important? The leadership, if people are going to work with Indigenous communities, like really,
huge.
I think in terms of your organization, I think, do you have the clients that you work with at the table with you, creating like what goes on in your organization?
Yeah,
Uh,
and I'll speak to that specifically. Kind of ending that point was that, you know, there's that peace, there's power, and then there's righteousness. And
mm,
understanding, how do you get somebody into a space of understanding what their righteousness is? You know,
mm,
people, I am hard pressed to believe that people are bad. You
mm,
know, there is righteousness in there, there's beauty in there, and their decisions or their paths or the, you know, their trauma, wherever that has brought them, does not necessarily make them a bad person. There's good in every heart, and it's how it's being expressed or how you're experiencing it. So with the Dudes Club, um, very interesting space. The leadership at that level, you know, the Dr. Paul Gross is a co-founder, uh, whom is non-Indigenous. He's the, you know, the chief medical officer or medical director, um, and the, you know, Henry Charles from Musqueam was the co-founder of that. It initially brought men together who, you know, they identified that our men are, and I'll say this very confidently, men are weak without one another. Men are weak without one another. We are so much more powerful when we have our brothers next to us, and we become so much more powerful when we can work together and then be supported and directed in this equal space with our women, right? For me, and for us, we come from a very powerful woman, matriarchal society. So um, it's without a doubt, our men are very powerful, but we know our place, we know our support, and how critical our work is, and how critical our women are for building us up. And so with the Dudes Club, it's a space where they are bringing men together. And I say it very specifically, they are bringing men together to connect as a brotherhood, to talk. And it's not a, it's, you know, it's a brotherhood for wellness, but it is not prescribed. The leadership at every Dudes Club across BC and on a national scale, um, the champions, if you will, the facilitators, the leadership is actually the individuals who are showing up. We do not determine what is leadership. We do not determine who is their leadership. It is on a plane of curious to serious. And really, you know, to start off a group, it's a few men come together to hold space, not talk about health, not talk about disparities, hold space, get a haircut, share food, watch a game. And over time, when you build that camaraderie, when you build that brotherhood back, that guard goes down, right? It's everyone comes in. And that's the one ask is, if you're going to enter into the space, you leave your armor at the door. You know, people should not care about, you know, if you're of you're gay, you're bi, you're two-spirit, you're that. If you identify as a man, you know, if your spirit calls and identifies you as, you know, you're stepping in the space as a man, you are welcome. Those leader, and you know, when people come in, they tend to be on the first side, is that curious, right? Just to hang out and, you know, not show any vulnerability, and just, you know, be curious about the space. And over time, they see their value. They see, you know, that people love them being there. They're reminded how important they are, and thank you for coming, and here, have this food, share it with us. And it goes into the sense of owning their own sense of purpose, their own sense of value, to the point they bridge onto serious, right? Where they're like, you know what, I am a leader, or I have these skills, and that reciprocity kicks in, right? I can bring this here. So, you know, with the Dudes Club, we have 42 different locations across BC, and the leaders in those groups, the facilitators in those groups, they're just community members who decided they're going to put more into it because they see the value, and it allows them to and so what we're, I guess, with all that being said, is there isn't a model for a cookie cutter model for success. You know, it's strictly on the community's want. It is fully, in my belief, it is a fully decolonized methodology, where it's the community coming together. It's, you know, a lot of times it's the women encouraging their men, go check them out, you know. And ultimately, I think where the Dudes Club is, they're just boys. It's your little boy inside. And whether, you know, you face trauma, uh, when you face trauma, in my personal belief, when you have a major traumatic experience, your child ends growing there. And so you know, you walk around this place, sorry, that's ableistic language, as you move around that space, um, you see people who you know, they're grown men in this space, sharing space. But as you actually begin to unpack and look deep at people, and especially when you get into a space of safety and vulnerability, you start to see these little boys. And that, to me, is success, is that they can open their heart up and bring that little boy out. and start talking about healing, whether it's, you know, the trauma that they face, the trauma that they are living or continuing to live, if it's the abuse, wherever it is, right? And so I think in an artistic sense, the idea of holding space can't be prescribed. You cannot prescribe things. And I think a decolonized methodology in the arts is creating, you know, what does a classroom look like? It would look completely different from, you know, your classroom. And is that a safe space? Is that, I remember, you know, taking art programs, taking courses, you know, in being in classroom, and it is a very, it can be very triggering, right? There's your DNA. If you have experienced, you know, intergenerational trauma associated to residential schools, being put into a classroom to do your art, all you're doing is unlocking that trauma, and people are sitting with that. Now, there may be you know, people who are able to take it and express it in that space and actually challenge it. But there are individuals who, you know, you can't get art out of me by putting me in a classroom. My art comes out here. My art comes out when I dance. My art, and or being in a certain space with certain people, that's when it lights up, right? And I'm like, oh, I need to write this down. I need to draw. So I think that idea of decolonizing the arts, especially in a Western institution, isn't, you know, it's that fine line of trying to find space for the I don't like the term student. It's finding space for that individual, and finding, you know, how do you support that the individual to find their safe spot, to find a place where they can open their heart, bring, you know, bring their child out, bring their young adult out, bring their ancestors out, unlock their, you know, their spiritual connection, their trauma, that unlock their DNA pieces um, to to fully express what they are trying to express, to fully express the piece of art, and even challenge them in, you know, giving them an area of, we'd love to see you express you in this space, right? That is conducive to their practice. And so in the same respect of, you know, the Dudes Club, it's, we don't determine anything. If they're, you know, the community comes around the men, it starts out by, we'll connect with the community from, you know, from the Western model or Western system, you know, First Nations Health Authority. We connect with the health director and say, is there a way that we can connect with the community? We never go into community. That is the number one piece. And there's a lot of methodology here. We never go into a community as a white savior saying, we want to have a Dudes Club in your community. Never. We will only go out to a community once we were given an invite to come, to bring our knowledge, to bring medicine, to bring the idea. And you know, the Dudes Club, even the logo, like there's Dudes Clubs around BC that they don't have the logo. They don't even call themselves Dudes Club. They have their own traditional name. They have their own traditional logo, because that is what decolonized is. The medicine and the practice. You know, we fly the champions, if you will, or the key facilitators. We fly them in every year to train the trainer, and we just allow them, we hold space and let them connect to each other, and we provide, you know, proven facilitation skill, expert, you know, facilitators on how you may want to use this type of knowledge to strengthen your community. And so a lot of times those groups in rural communities, that they're completely controlled by the men and the community that are supporting them, to build and strengthen and reintroduce and or re-educate, or it would be almost removing the pre-existing knowledge of what a man is supposed to be. It's re-educating the importance of what a man needs to be in that community. What does that mean to their nation? And so I think as an artist, we are, again, like I was saying, going back to, you know, being in grade 1 or 2, is we were given a task, you know, to express ourselves in this light. And as a child, you really have no, you know, you have a very limited or a very limited experience as far as being, you know, the societal impressions or education at that point. I mean, there's, without a doubt, there's a lot, and also in, you know, intergenerationally, but at that rate, you are still so raw in your form, is that you just give, you give, you give, you give. So in that sense, it's, how do you get someone to do art, express a specific, you know, area of focus, or a word, or you know, represent from their specific art form.
Right.
I think that is really the idea of having, like, if I had to go through it all over again and go through a very Western system, I think a lot of students forget, is that institutions, you know, they are, in my opinion, are excellent foundations to grow yourself. The network alone, right? You're paying for the network alone of that, to be inspired by people, to be inspired by leaders and pioneers and knowledge keepers who have been cultivated into that specific institution. But the word I keep using here is paid. You're paying for that experience. You are paying to be part of that. So
there's a buy-in, you think? There's a buy-in, like you're buying into
without
it?
a doubt. Without a doubt. If you are paying a tuition, you are making the decision to put, it is a business. It is a business. It is a contract.
But do you think that Indigenous people struggle with that, like some self-determination, when you look at, you know, applying traditional knowledge in an institution, and you're paying for the credentials? Like, do you think that's a struggling place to be for Indigenous artists?
Huge. I think there's an idea behind that, deciding, and I've you know, personally, I've stopped professors in the midst of the conversation, and, you know, because they weren't answering a question that I had. And, you know, to no disrespect to the class or no disrespect to the prof, I'm paying for that time. I am investing in my space. I am investing the money, the time, the energy to be here. You know, it's not okay, I have to pay, and then, you know, I better show up. It's every aspect of that is, I am investing into, I want to be there. And I think a lot of students forget that. Is, okay, well, I paid for this course or this year, and, you know, I have to attend class. And it's like, well, no, you don't have to attend class. You don't have to pay for the class. You don't have to be there. So ensure that what you're investing in from the get-go is investing in that seat. Invest in your heart and your mind to be in that seat, to learn and pull from people. And don't be shy if you don't understand, or your opinions are challenged, because that's how you grow. And so it's this idea of, especially as Indigenous people, and this is on a professional level too, I've been told, you know, we are in a Western system, we were set up to fail. We were told we would fail. A lot of individuals don't believe that they are smart enough, that they are wise enough, that they, you know, aren't worth it. And, you know, that's intergenerational. It goes through. And so going into a system, an institution, navigating a Western institution, I don't care how profound their indigenous decolonized methodology is, I could care less about how profound it is in that, you know, one specific institution. I think what people have to remember is you, or that one individual who's decided to join that institution is immigrating. They are immigrating. You are an immigrant out of your own community, out of your own home, and you are migrating into a system that you have to navigate, whom, you know, there may be, you know, support systems there may be, you know, mentors there, but ultimately